The winter playground sat frozen under a colorless sky, the kind of afternoon where cold cuts through fabric and settles in your bones like a curse. Two 7-year-old boys in matching navy coats pushed themselves higher on the swings, their laughter the only warm thing for miles. Luca and Dante Conti, their father's treasures, his only softness in a world built on concrete and silence. The hooded figure emerged from between the bare trees like a blade wrapped in ice. Allara Harper was 34 years old but looked 47, her hands raw from 3 jobs, her coat held together with safety pins and prayer. She sat on a nearby bench, watching Micah play in the distance, her 7-year-old son chasing pigeons that refused to scatter. She had $2 in her pocket. Exactly 2. The envelope in her coat read final notice in red letters that screamed louder than any voice. $22,000. 14 days. The man moved fast. Allara saw the glint before her mind understood what she was seeing, a blade catching the weak January sunlight. The hooded figure lunged toward the swings where Luca reached for the sky, his small hands gripping the chains, his whole body suspended in perfect innocence. She did not think. Her legs carried her forward before her brain caught up. The distance between the bench and the children was maybe 20 feet. Her worn shoes pounded the frozen ground. The man's breath came in sharp, angry pulls. His knife rose like a promise of ending something. She threw herself between the blade and the boy. The steel punched through the soft place where her shoulder met her neck, driving deep with the weight of hatred behind it. The pain came as shock first, then fire. She gasped, a sound that belonged to someone drowning, and wrapped both arms around Luca and Dante anyway, pulling them against her body, shielding them the way a mother shields her own. Blood spread across the front of her worn coat, blooming like a dark flower, soaking through the fabric in seconds. The boy screamed. Luca screamed his brother's name. Dante screamed for his father. Their small fists pounded against her ribs, terrified, trapped between the strange woman and their swings. The hooded man hesitated for one fraction of a second, maybe surprised that she had moved, that she had chosen the knife over herself. That hesitation was enough. Footsteps exploded from every direction at once. Black SUVs screeched into the playground with the sound of an apocalypse arriving, metal grinding against the frozen asphalt. Doors flew open. Men in tailored suits poured out like a flood, their hands moving to weapons, their faces hard as stone monuments. The hooded man ran. He abandoned his knife and fled between the buildings, and within seconds the playground was swarming with mercenary precision, 15 armed men, maybe 20, surrounding the area in a perimeter that sealed off the world. Their weapons stayed drawn. Their eyes stayed alert. But one man ignored all protocol and dropped to his knees in the blood. Matteo Conti was 6 feet 3 inches of carefully controlled devastation. His scar ran from the outer corner of his left eye down to his jaw, a pale line that split his face like a geography of violence. His eyes were winter gray, the color of a sky before a blizzard. He wore a cashmere coat that cost more than Allara's annual rent, and beneath it a suit tailored by someone in Milan who understood power. A gold watch caught the weak sunlight. Several rings adorned his fingers. His hands shook as he knelt beside her. "Stay with me," he said, and his voice cracked in a way that seemed impossible, deep and solid like an oath, but fractured now, barely holding together. "Stay with me. Look at me. Look at my eyes. You stay with me right now." His hands pressed against her wound. Blood covered his palms, ran down his wrists, soaked into the cuffs of his white shirt. He didn't seem to notice or care. His entire focus collapsed into that single moment, that single woman, that single need to keep her breathing. Marco and Enzo stood paralyzed 10 feet away, their mouths open, their minds struggling to process what they were witnessing. Marco was tall and lean, his dark hair slicked back, his suit pressed to perfection. Enzo was broader, wider through the shoulders, with a neck like a tree trunk and hands that looked built for breaking things. They had worked for Matteo Conti for 15 years. In 15 years, they had never seen him touch anyone with gentleness. They had never seen his hands shake. They had never heard his voice break. "Get the car," Matteo commanded, his eyes never leaving her face. St. Mary's. Tell them to have surgery ready. Tell them I am coming. Tell them if she dies, they all die. His lieutenants moved like they'd been electrified. Allara's vision was beginning to tunnel, the edges of the world turning grey and distant. She felt cold spreading through her chest like floodwater. Her breath came shallow and quick. The two boys were still pressed against her, still screaming, and she wanted to tell them it was okay. She wanted to tell them that sometimes you just moved because something needed protecting, and your own blood didn't matter when compared to their small, innocent lives. But the words wouldn't come. Matteo wrapped his coat around her shoulders, that cashmere coat worth more than she'd earned in the last 2 years, and lifted her into his arms as if she weighed nothing. She felt the strength in his body, the controlled power in his movement. She felt his heart pounding against her back, fast and hard and terrified. "Stay with me," he repeated, and it sounded like a prayer from a man who did not pray. The sirens arrived within minutes, but the black SUVs were already moving, screaming toward the hospital with no regard for traffic laws or red lights. Marco rode in the back with Allara, his hand on her shoulder, his voice steady and professional even as his eyes betrayed his shock. Enzo sat in the front passenger seat, phone pressed to his ear, barking orders. "Clear the cardiac wing. Clear it now. I do not care who is scheduled. I do not care what procedure they are in the middle of. Matteo Conti is coming, and he is bringing a woman, and if she does not walk out of the hospital alive, you will spend the rest of your very short lives understanding what regret truly means." The drive took 6 minutes. Allara drifted in and out of consciousness, aware of the motion, the cold air pouring through the open window, the distant sound of Matteo's voice giving orders in Italian, his words sharp and staccato and absolute. She became aware of the two boys still in the vehicle, still crying, and some part of her understood that they had seen violence today. They would carry this with them. But they would carry it alive. The hospital doors exploded inward. Matteo carried her through the emergency room entrance like he was carrying the most precious thing in the world, like her life was the only thing that mattered, like stopping her from bleeding out was a mission he would accomplish or die in the attempt. Doctors scattered to clear the way. Nurses moved with the kind of urgency that comes from understanding that refusing to act would be fatal. The last thing Allara heard before the anesthesia pulled her under was Matteo's voice, "Fix her. Fix her and live. Fail and die. Those are your only 2 options." And then there was nothing but darkness and the fading sound of medical monitors and the absolute certainty that something irreversible had shifted in the universe. But what no one in that hospital understood was that this act of violence, this moment of unspeakable courage, would unravel every chain that had bound Allara Harper's life. She had no idea that the man kneeling in her blood was about to become either her salvation or her deepest wound. She did not know that she had just stepped into a world of power and darkness where the rules were written in Italian and enforced by men with cold eyes and steady hands. She did not know that everything was about to change. Before we continue, drop a like if this story hits you deep. Share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe so you don't miss what is coming tomorrow. Every comment you leave is a precious source of motivation that helps us continue creating these stories. Now let us go back to the beginning, to understand how a widow drowning in debt ended up saving the children of New York's most dangerous man. Let us rewind to the day that started like every other day, when Allara Harper was still invisible. 3 months before the frozen highway, before the black SUVs appeared like a prayer answered by the devil himself, Allara Harper stood in her kitchen at 2 in the morning, counting coins on a laminate table that had seen better decades. The apartment was silent except for the hum of the refrigerator, a sound like the slow death of hope. She arranged quarters and dimes and nickels into small stacks, moving them across the table like pieces on a chessboard where the only losing move was already made. Her hands trembled. Not from cold, though November had stolen every trace of warmth from the thin walls around her. They trembled from the mathematics of survival, from the brutal arithmetic that never, ever came out in her favor. $43. That was all that remained between her and the end of the month. She needed that money for 3 days. 3 days stretched ahead like an ocean she was supposed to swim across on fumes. The refrigerator door hung open. 3 eggs. Half a carton of milk, the kind that smells like pennies if you wait one day too long. A head of lettuce so wilted it looked like it had already given up. She closed the door and sat back down. Somewhere in the apartment, her 6-year-old son Micah slept in the room that was not much larger than a closet, drawings taped to the walls, crayon renderings of stick figures holding hands under yellow suns. He drew happy families because he had never known anything else to draw. The debt collector's letter sat on the corner of the table, stamped final notice in red ink that looked like blood. She had read it 43 times. The numbers had not changed. $47,000 owed on her late husband's hospital bills, on the funeral that cost more than a used car, on the surgical complications that could not be stopped even after everything they owned had been sold. 8 years ago, James Harper had fallen from a scaffolding on a construction site in Queens. He fell 15 feet. The ground did not break his fall gently. The medical bills came in waves. Then they came in tsunamis. The hospital wanted payment. The collection agencies wanted payment. The state wanted payment. And James was already dead, so none of the payment could reach him. It could only reach his widow, could only reach his debts, could only reach the small boy who asked sometimes why Daddy did not come home anymore. 8 years of drowning. Allara worked 3 jobs. Night shifts at the Golden Moon Diner on Amsterdam Avenue, where she carried trays of eggs and burnt coffee and collected tips from men who saw through her like she was made of glass. Weekend mornings at the laundromat on 118th Street, pressing hotel linens for 12 hours straight until her hands bled small wounds where the steam had burned away the skin. And on Tuesdays and Thursdays, she cleaned offices in the financial district, scrubbing toilets in buildings where single paintings on the walls cost more than everything she would earn in a year. 3 jobs. The money vanished before she could even hold it properly. Her landlord Tyler Brennan owned this apartment and 200 others just like it across the city. He was 56 years old, with a face that had settled into the permanent expression of a man accustomed to getting what he wanted. His eyes were the color of old leather, and they always found her, always tracked her movements with the kind of patience that predators understand. For 8 years, he had demanded rent payments. For 8 years, rent payments had come with conditions that lived in the spaces between the words. 3 days ago, he had stood in her doorway, not bothering to knock, never bothering to knock, and handed her an eviction notice stamped in official black letters. 2 weeks, Harper, he had said. His voice moved like oil across water, like something that left stains. You produce $22,000 or you and the boy are on the street. Middle of winter, just like that. $22,000. She had $2 in her wallet. $2 for 4 more days. $2 for food, for the medication Micah needed for his asthma, for the bus fare to work, for everything that kept them breathing. She had counted the coins on this table so many times that the numbers had stopped meaning anything real. They had become abstract, like the numbers on the eviction notice, like the numbers on the hospital bills that never stopped arriving even though James was buried in a cemetery in the Bronx where nobody visited him anymore. The building management office sat 3 blocks from where she lived. She had walked there yesterday during her lunch break, still wearing her diner uniform, still smelling like grease and desperation. Tyler Brennan had been leaning against the counter, his arms crossed, his cheap cologne filling the small room like a warning. Pay up or get out, Harper, he had said. You know what I want. You know what we do with people who don't cooperate. He had smiled, and his teeth were yellow like old piano keys. You've always been reasonable before. Don't start being difficult now. She had walked away with her spine straight, with her shoulders pressed back, with her chin at an angle that suggested she possessed some kind of power. But her hands trembled as she had descended the stairs. Her hands trembled then just as they trembled now, counting coins at 2 in the morning, doing impossible mathematics. The weight of 8 years pressed down on her shoulders like gravity itself had doubled. 8 years since James died. 8 years of Tyler Brennan's hands on her body when rent was late, when money was short, when there was nothing left to give except herself. 8 years of pretending that his fingers were something other than invasion. 8 years of showering in water so hot it nearly burned, scrubbing her skin until it turned red, until she bled a little, trying to wash away the feeling of being used. She wore long sleeves even in the summer. Not because of fashion. Because of the marks. The scars mapped her desperation across her back in raised silver lines and newer pink marks where the wounds had not fully healed. 8 years of scars. 8 years of silence, because who would believe her? Who would help her? She was nobody. Just a waitress. Just a widow. Just a woman desperate enough to trade her body for the roof over her son's head. Nobody helped people like her. Micah had asked yesterday why they could not have pizza anymore. He had asked it the way children ask impossible questions, with the assumption that mommy knew everything and could fix anything. She had forced a smile. The kind of smile that costs more than coins, that costs pieces of your soul you cannot get back. Soon, baby, she had told him. Soon we'll have pizza again. But the arithmetic said there would be no pizza. The arithmetic said that by the time 2 weeks passed, there would be no apartment either. The arithmetic said that she and her son would be standing on the street in the middle of a New York winter with $2 and a prayer and nothing else. It was that prayer, whispered in desperation, that pulled her into the darkness and the cold and the moment that would change everything. 3 days later, on a November night when the temperature had dropped so far that breathing hurt, Allara's 15-year-old Honda died on the highway outside the city. The car had been limping for months, had been falling apart in increments so small she had not wanted to acknowledge them. Now it died completely, the engine seized, smoke pouring from underneath like the car itself was burning from the inside out. She pulled onto the shoulder and sat in the driver's seat with her hands gripping the steering wheel, not moving, not crying, not doing anything at all. Just existing in the space between alive and broken. She had $2. No AAA membership. No family members with working cars. No friends with the kind of money required to fix an engine. She had $2 and a phone with 3% battery remaining and a life that was collapsing in slow motion around her. The highway was empty. Just headlights passing in the darkness, each one a stranger who would not stop, each one a moment of hope that immediately died. She got out of the car and sat on the guardrail, her breath clouding in the November air, frost coating everything, the metal beneath her, the grass beside the road, her own hair and eyelashes. The stars above were sharp as diamonds, the kind of clarity that comes only on the coldest nights. She sat there for what might have been 10 minutes or 20 minutes or an hour. Time had stopped meaning anything. Her phone was going to die. Her money was going to run out. Her son was waiting for her at Mrs. Chen's apartment 2 blocks away, where she paid $50 a week for childcare she could barely afford. And in 2 weeks, the eviction notice would become reality. Then the sound changed. The sound of the highway shifted. Multiple engines. Heavy. Purposeful. For black SUVs appeared around the curve, moving in formation, moving like something choreographed. They slowed as they approached her sitting figure on the guardrail. The lead vehicle pulled off the road and stopped, and the doors opened like the jaws of some enormous animal. Men emerged. 3 of them at first, then more. All dressed in black. All moving with the kind of coordination that comes from training, from discipline, from knowing that their lives depended on precision. They approached her with their hands visible, moving slowly, moving like they understood that a desperate woman was a dangerous animal. The wind howled across the highway like a blade wrapped in ice, carrying the smell of winter and exhaust and something else, the metallic smell of money, of power, of a world that had nothing to do with coins counted at 2 in the morning. A man emerged from the lead vehicle last. He was tall, perhaps 6'1", with shoulders that suggested he had spent decades building himself into something formidable. His coat was cashmere, the color of storm clouds, and it was worth more than a year of her old rent. Everything about him spoke of a world she could not touch, could not enter, could not even imagine from the inside. He approached her slowly, and when he spoke, his voice moved like thunder, like something that shook the air itself. "You need help?" he asked. She looked up at him, and in that moment, standing at the edge of a frozen highway with $2 in her pocket and a life that was ending, Allara Harper had no idea that this man was Matteo Conti, that his empire stretched across the entire city, that his name was whispered in fear and respect in places she had never been. She just saw a man. And for the first time in 8 years, someone was asking if she needed help. "My car," she said, and her voice came out small, like a child's voice. "It broke down. I don't have money for a mechanic." He looked at the Honda, then back at her, and something moved behind his eyes. Something cold and dangerous stirred in his chest, though she could not have known why. Could not have known that he was seeing something in her desperation that reminded him of his own. "Get in the vehicle," he said. "We will take you home." And the 12 men in black, the convoy, the man whose name moved like power through the city, carried her away from the frozen highway and into a story that would break open everything she had resigned herself to enduring. The phone rings at 11:13 in the morning, and Allara Harper's hands begin to shake before she even answers it. She knows. Somehow she already knows. The voice on the other end is smooth, cultured, the kind of voice that belongs to someone who has never had to count pennies or skip meals or choose between her son's winter coat and the electric bill. "Miss Harper. Victoria Ashford. I believe we have a mutual connection. Tyler Brennan mentioned you." Allara's stomach drops like a stone into dark water. "I'm calling to suggest a meeting. Today. Noon. The building management office on 5th and Lexington. You'll come alone, of course. Bring nothing. Say nothing to anyone." The pause stretches like a blade. Or by this evening, that eviction notice becomes real. And not just real, permanent. I have people in the housing authority. Very cooperative people. The line goes dead. Allara stands in the tiny diner kitchen where she has been working her morning shift, her apron still tied around her waist, her hands still smelling of grease and coffee. The lunch crowd hasn't arrived yet. For a moment, the only sound is the hum of the industrial refrigerator, a sound she has heard 10,000 times but never truly noticed until this second, until everything changed. 3 hours until noon. She texts Marco, just his number, no context. He responds instantly, "Where?" She sends the address. His response comes back in 10 seconds, "I'm sending 2 blocks away. Don't go in alone." But she has to go in alone. If she doesn't, Victoria Ashford will make sure Micah has nowhere to sleep tonight. The building management office sits on the 5th floor of a glass tower, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Allara has never been this high before. The elevator rises, and her ears pop with the pressure, or maybe that's just her heart trying to escape her chest. Victoria Ashford is waiting in a conference room. She sits at one end of a long mahogany table, diamonds catching light from a chandelier that costs more than Allara's annual salary. Her suit is Chanel, her nails are shellacked into daggers, her smile is the smile of a wolf in Hermes. "Sit," Victoria says, and Allara sits. "I've been thinking about you," Victoria continues, her voice like honey poured over broken glass. "About how someone from your background suddenly has money for rent. How someone like you suddenly has protection. How a man like Matteo Conti, a man whose attention usually means death, is concerned with a widow and her bastard child. My son is not." "Let me finish." Victoria opens a laptop. On the screen, photographs appear. Allara walking with Matteo's twins. Matteo kneeling beside Micah at the poker room. Allara and Matteo in his car, his hand on the back of her seat. All of them were taken from a distance. All of them are true. All of them are devastating. "These are going to social services," Victoria says. A concerned citizen noting that a single mother is exposing her young child to organized crime. To gambling. To men with weapons. Do you know what happens then? Custody evaluation. Maybe loss of custody entirely. I have 3 lawyers who specialize in maternal unfitness cases, and they are very, very good. Allara's vision tunnels. Or, Victoria continues, you disappear. You leave this city. You leave Matteo Conti. You withdraw from his life completely. You go somewhere far away and you start over, and nobody has to know that your son was ever exposed to his world. You disappear, and these photographs never see the light of day. If I leave, Tyler? Tyler is going to forgive your debt. In writing. I'll make sure of it. Victoria closes the laptop. I don't care about Tyler's money. I care about teaching men like Matteo Conti that there are consequences for stepping outside their lane. He takes care of his business, I take care of mine, and everyone stays where they belong. The silence in the room is absolute. Not even the sound of traffic from 5 stories below breaches it. You have until tomorrow morning, Victoria says. 6 a.m. If you're still in New York, these photographs go to every agency, every news outlet, and every social services office in the state. And then your son grows up visiting you in prison for endangering a minor. Allara leaves the office at 12:33 in the afternoon. She does not remember walking out. She does not remember the elevator. The next thing she is aware of is standing on 5th Avenue in the cold November sun, and Marco is beside her, his hand gripping her elbow. What happened? He says. It is not a question. She tells him. The words come out in fragments, like breaking glass. The photographs. The threat. The choice, disappear or lose Micah. Marco's expression doesn't change, but something shifts in his eyes. Something cold. He pulls out his phone and speaks in rapid Italian, too fast for Allara to follow. When he finishes, he looks at her. Get in the car. Where are we going? To Matteo. Now. The warehouse is not like the underground poker room. The poker room is velvet and leather and carefully controlled chaos. The warehouse is concrete and shadows, with fluorescent lights that hum like angry wasps. Matteo stands at a table covered with documents, his suit jacket discarded, his sleeves rolled up, his scar visible in the harsh light. When he sees Allara, he goes very still. Tell him, Marco says. She tells him. Every detail. The photographs. Victoria Ashford's voice like honey and poison. The 6 a.m. deadline. The choice that isn't a choice at all. Matteo listens without moving. His jaw clenches. His hands form fists. When she finishes, the silence stretches so long that Allara thinks he might be made of stone. Then he speaks, and his voice is quiet, which is somehow worse than if he had shouted. Victoria Ashford has forgotten something about the world she lives in. She has forgotten that there are people who do not live by her rules. He turns to Marco. Find her. Find everything. Every photograph, every threat, every connection. And Matteo, he pauses, the first time he has called Enzo by name in years, and Enzo steps forward from the shadows. Find Tyler. Bring him here. Boss, Marco starts. Not dead. Not yet. I want him alive when I tell him what his life has become. Allara reaches out, touches his arm. Matteo, wait. You can't, if you do something, it will come back on you, and then. He looks at her, and there is nothing gentle in his expression. You took a knife for my children. 8 years of a knife, and you never told anyone because you were trying to survive. No more. This ends now. Enzo moves like a ghost through the warehouse, making calls, disappearing into the darkness. Within 20 minutes, men begin arriving, a dozen of them, all in dark suits, all with eyes that have seen things that would break ordinary people. They receive assignments in quiet voices. Addresses. Names. Surveillance targets. Within an hour, half of them are gone, moving through the city like shadows with purpose. Marco stands beside Allara while Matteo paces the warehouse, his phone pressed to his ear. You love him, Marco says. It is not a question. Allara doesn't answer. She doesn't have to. He loved his wife once, Marco continues. Years ago. Before she died in childbirth with the twins. Before he became this. He gestures at the warehouse, at the men, at the machinery of vengeance. I have not seen him look at someone the way he looks at you since then. In 15 years. I have not seen it once. That doesn't matter, Allara whispers. Love doesn't matter if it destroys everything. Sometimes, Marco says, love is the only thing that saves everything. The phone in Allara's pocket buzzes. Unknown number. She answers. A man's voice, strained and terrified. Please, please, I don't know what you people want. I didn't do anything, I swear. In the background, Enzo's voice, you're going to want to hear this. The warehouse falls completely silent. Matteo takes the phone from her hands. He listens. Then he speaks, and his voice is quiet, steady, inevitable as death itself. Yes, Tyler. Your life is ending. Not tonight. Not tomorrow. But it is ending. Every dollar you touch, every piece of property you own, every business connection you have. All of it is being dismantled. By tomorrow afternoon, every victim of yours, and I have found 37 of them, will have filed simultaneously with the FBI, the Housing Authority, and the state courts. By the end of the week, you will be arrested for extortion, housing fraud, and assault. By next month, you will be convicted. You will spend 40 years in federal prison, Tyler. 40 years. And everyone in New York will know why. He hangs up. He looks at Allara, and there is grief in his eyes, and rage, and something else, something that looks almost like hope. Nobody, he says, takes what is mine. And you, he steps toward her, close enough that she can feel his warmth, close enough that the whole warehouse is watching. You have been mine since the night I found you on that frozen highway. The silence breaks like a spell. Tomorrow, the newspapers will run the story. By the end of the week, it will be national news. By the end of the month, 2 powerful people will be in separate federal prisons, and the city will know that there is a man who protects those who cannot protect themselves. But in this moment, in this warehouse filled with men who would die for him, Matteo Conti reaches out and takes Allara's hand, and for the first time in 8 years, she is not alone. Sometimes one hand reached out at the right moment can change an entire life. The clear winter sky mocks her with its beauty. Allara Harper sits on the concrete steps of the building management office, her legs trembling beneath her, the kind of cold that does not just freeze skin but freezes hope itself. Frost coats the metal railing, sharp as broken glass, and she presses her fingers against it until they go numb. $6,000 in 48 hours. She has $317 in her account. 317. The scars on her back ache with phantom pain, 8 years of choosing survival over dignity, 8 years of Tyler Brennan's hands and his threats and his casual cruelty. She thought that was over. She thought Matteo Conti had made it over. She pulls out her phone with shaking hands and stares at the screen, the familiar descent beginning again, that terrible gravity pulling her down into the place she has fought so hard to leave. The women's shelter 3 neighborhoods over. She knows the number by heart. Her finger hovers over the call button. The shelter means starting over. Means Micah sharing a room with strangers. Means admitting that nothing ever really changes for people like her, that every escape is temporary, that the world is built specifically to keep people like her trapped. She takes a breath to press dial. A black SUV pulls up to the curb. Marco steps out, his dark suit absorbing the winter light. He does not smile. He simply nods toward the car. She gets in without asking questions. Marco drives in silence, the city passing by in shades of gray and brown, and Allara sits perfectly still, her phone still in her hand, still trembling. The poker room smells like cigar smoke and old money. Matteo Conti stands at the green felt table, his expensive coat draped over the back of a leather chair, his white dress shirt unbuttoned at the collar, revealing the hard edges of his collarbone. His eyes are storm gray and they cut toward her the moment she enters. Enzo and Marco stay by the door. Tell me what happened, Matteo says. She tells him everything. The documents. The deleted records. The restraining order. Victoria Ashford's smile, sharp as a knife. Tyler Brennan's voice, low and threatening, you have 48 hours or face immediate eviction. And this time there is a restraining order preventing Matteo Conti or any of his associates from interfering. Matteo listens without moving. When she finishes, he walks to the window overlooking the Manhattan skyline, his silhouette solid against the glass like a monument carved from stone. "Judge Morrison," Marco says quietly. "He is theirs. Completely. Boss, we cannot touch them legally. The restraining order is airtight." Matteo does not turn around. "Then we do not touch them legally." That night he makes calls. Not to his soldiers. To someone else. Federal agents who owe him favors, who have looked the other way at the right moments, who understand that sometimes justice moves through channels that have nothing to do with law. He hands over everything. 8 years of financial records showing Tyler Brennan's pattern of extortion, housing fraud, sexual coercion documented and dated and irrefutable. Bank statements proving Victoria Ashford's involvement in a dozen similar schemes across Manhattan. Money laundering. Tax evasion. Conspiracy. The evidence piles up like a mountain no judge can move. At dawn 2 days later, the FBI raid begins. 12 agents in tactical gear move through the building like shadows, synchronized and professional, their footsteps echoing in the stairwell at 6:02 in the morning. The battering ram takes down Tyler Brennan's apartment door and splinters it open. He wakes in his bed, eyes snapping wide, and scrambles backward, tangling in silk sheets, his hands flying up. "FBI, get on the ground now," an agent shouts. "There has been a mistake," Tyler gasps, his body shaking. "I did not do anything, Tyler Brennan, the agent cuts him off, badge raised, "You are under arrest for extortion, housing fraud, sexual assault, and conspiracy to commit wire fraud." He collapses to his knees, trembling like a cornered animal, his predatory composure shattering into fragments. Please, I will give you anything, I will." Handcuffs click. Finality made of metal. Simultaneously across town, Victoria Ashford answers her penthouse door in a silk robe, champagne from last night's party still on her breath. The FBI badge appears in her face and her skin goes the color of ash. "Victoria Ashford," the agent says, "you are under arrest." "Do you know who I am?" she whispers. Her voice is not threatening anymore. It is small. "Do you know who my father is?" "Yes, the agent says. He is next." The handcuffs click. She screams as they lead her past doormen and early morning pedestrians, her composure cracking open like ice in spring, her face twisted and desperate. Cameras flash. Her mouth opens and closes, opening and closing, but no words come out that matter anymore. By noon it is on every news channel, Manhattan landlord and socialite arrested in federal housing fraud scheme. The charges stack like building blocks, 40 years minimum. No bail. Evidence too solid to fight. Tyler Brennan's face on television, gray and terrified, led from the courthouse in handcuffs, no longer a predator, just a small, broken man facing the machinery of justice finally grinding toward him. Victoria Ashford screaming at reporters, "This is a setup, I am innocent," but her voice drowns in the noise of her own destruction. Allara watches it on the diner television during her shift. Her hand covers her mouth. A waitress beside her shakes her head. Can you believe it? 8 years of complaints and suddenly the FBI cares. Allara knows exactly why. That evening she goes to the poker room. The warehouse is quiet except for the distant hum of the city outside. Matteo sits alone at the green felt table, cigar smoke curling around his head, and she stops 3 feet away from him, unable to move closer, unable to move away. "You did this," she says. He looks up. "Federal agents did this. Evidence did this. You gave them the evidence." "I did." Her voice breaks. "Why?" "I did not ask you to save me. I never asked for any of this." He stands slowly. He steps around the table until there is almost nothing between them, just the space of breath and heartbeat. His voice drops to something almost gentle. "Because 8 years ago you needed someone to care and no one did. Because you threw yourself in front of a knife for my sons without hesitation. Because when I look at you I remember what it feels like to want something other than revenge." The silence in the warehouse is absolute. Outside, the city roars, sirens and horns and the endless sound of survival, but in here there is only quiet, only his eyes on hers, only the moment finally arriving that has lived between them since the frozen night on the highway when he found her shaking and alone. "Nobody," he says, and his hand reaches out, takes what is mine. "And you have been mine since that night." Her fingers touch his palm. His hand closes around hers. For the first time in 8 years, Allara Harper is not alone. The men standing at the doors exchange looks, and in their eyes is something they have never seen in Matteo Conti before, not revenge, not control, not the machine of empire turning. Hope. Just hope. Sometimes one hand reached out at exactly the right moment can change an entire life. 3 months had passed since the federal agents took Tyler Brennan and Victoria Ashford away in handcuffs. 3 months since Allara Harper stopped looking over her shoulder every time a car door slammed. 3 months since she learned what it felt like to breathe without fear sitting on her chest like a stone. She stood in the kitchen of her new apartment on the Upper West Side, unpacking dishes from a cardboard box marked kitchen in thick black marker. The apartment was small but hers, truly hers, paid for with her legitimate salary from Matteo's security company. $30,000 a year plus benefits. Health insurance. A 401k. Words she had never thought would apply to her. Matteo had created the position himself, head of family safety. Nobody questioned it. Nobody dared. Micah sat at the small kitchen table, age 7 now, coloring with precise concentration, his tongue poking out slightly as he worked. The crayon was blue. Everything he drew was blue lately, blue houses, blue trees, blue sky, blue people. His therapist said that was progress. Healing had colors. Winter sunlight streamed through the clean windows, windows that looked onto a street where children played safely, where cars passed without stopping, where the landlord did not smell like whiskey and menace. Allara set down a ceramic bowl, the same bowl her mother had owned, the one she had carried through 2 evictions and 1 flooded basement. She touched the rim, remembering. Her mother had been alone too. Her mother had fought too. But her mother had not had anyone reach out a hand. The thought made her chest tight. "Mama, where should I put this?" Micah held up a crayon drawing, 3 stick figures under a blue sun. 1 tall figure in the middle. 2 smaller ones on either side. She knelt beside his chair. "That is beautiful, baby. That can go on the refrigerator." As she taped it there, she caught her reflection in the stainless steel surface. Her back no longer bore the marks of 8 years of leverage and control. The scars remained, thin white lines like a map of survival, but no new ones had formed. No new bruises. No more torn skin. She wore a sleeveless shirt now, something she had not done since before Micah was born. The shoulder where the knife had gone through throbbed sometimes when it rained, but that was all. That was nothing compared to what it had been. The next afternoon, she found herself at the playground where it had happened. The one with the green benches and the cracked asphalt and the twisted oak tree that had been there for 40 years. Micah ran toward the jungle gym, his shoes barely touching the ground, Luca and Dante ahead of him, the 3 boys moving like water finding its own level. She sat on a bench, her shoulder fully healed now, just a small scar remaining, pale pink, fading, almost invisible unless you knew to look for it. Matteo appeared beside her without warning, the way he always did. He moved like smoke through a room, present and absent simultaneously. He wore a charcoal coat that cost more than 3 months of her old rent, a white shirt unbuttoned at the collar showing a thin gold chain. His dark eyes tracked the boys, watching them climb. "Regret it?" he asked. His voice was soft, the way it always was when they were alone. "The knife." She touched her shoulder, fingers tracing the thin line. "No. Even now? Especially now." She turned to look at him. "That was the first time in 8 years I chose something instead of having it chosen for me. I walked into that building not knowing what would happen. I made a choice. I am sorry I did not regret it." He looked at her with undisguised emotion, something that moved beneath his controlled surface like an animal waking after a long hibernation. You never have to apologize to me for choosing yourself. That same week, she found herself in the underground poker room where Matteo conducted his business. The room was all green felt and cigar smoke and men in suits standing at every door like gargoyles protecting treasure. Marco had asked her if she wanted to help with the books. She was good with numbers, he said. Precise. She saw patterns that others missed. She sat at a corner desk, spreadsheets in front of her, columns of numbers that represented money flowing from one place to another, some of it legitimate now, some of it still living in the grey zones where the law did not quite reach. Her fingers moved across the calculator keys, quick and certain. She caught an error in the 7th column. Then another in the 15th. Enzo leaned against her desk, arms crossed, grinning. Boss, you might have found the only person more paranoid than you. She is checking every number twice. 3 times. She thinks we are trying to cheat you. Matteo watched her work from across the room, his expression unreadable. Paranoia kept me alive, he said quietly. She looked up, and their eyes met across the distance. She smiled. Me too. The unspoken thing between them had weight now, gravity, like a planet pulling at the space around it. Neither of them spoke it, but it lived in the air between them, acknowledged, unavoidable, waiting. 1 week later, Matteo took her and the boys to the warehouse on the edge of the city where his father had died 15 years ago. The building was abandoned now, windows broken like missing teeth, graffiti covering every wall in layers of color and rage. Gang signs and names and territorial markers. Matteo had not been back since that night. They stood in the vast empty space, and the silence was heavy. The boys played in one corner, their voices echoing off concrete. Matteo walked to a point near the center of the floor. His hands were in his pockets. His shoulders were rigid. 17 years old, he said, and his voice sounded different here, older, fractured. Hiding in the rafters. I was supposed to be at school, but I skipped. I came here to watch my father work, to learn the business. He paused. They came at 3:53 in the afternoon. 4 men. All masked. I could not see their faces. I could only hear the gunshots and watch him fall and stay hidden while they left and he bled out on this concrete floor. Allara did not move. She did not interrupt. I built everything since then on vengeance, he continued. Every decision I made was about finding those 4 men and making them disappear from the earth. For 15 years, vengeance was the only thing that kept me alive. It was my prayer. My religion. My reason for breathing. She stepped closer to him. Vengeance kept you alive, she said. But it is not enough to live for anymore. Is it? He turned to face her, and there was something in his eyes that had never been there before. Something soft. Something that looked like surrender. No, he said. It is not. The boys' laughter echoed through the empty warehouse as the sun began to set, painting everything gold and old and almost beautiful. 6 months after the arrests. Spring had arrived in New York like a promise finally kept. The trees bloomed in shades of pink and white. The air smelled like rain and awakening. Allara stood in a garden at Matteo's private estate outside the city, watching her son play without fear, without hunger, without the shadow of Tyler Brennan darkening every moment of his existence. The twins were turning 8 today. There were lanterns strung between the trees and a long table covered with food. Marco and Enzo manned the grill, arguing about charcoal versus gas, their voices carrying the comfortable rhythm of men who had known each other for decades. Micah ran through the grass with Luca and Dante, their laughter sharp and bright and real. Allara stood under a blooming cherry tree, petals falling like snow around her shoulders. She wore a white dress, something she would never have bought for herself, something Matteo had left on her bed with a card that said simply, "For today. Because you deserve beautiful things." He appeared beside her, hands in his pockets, watching the children play. His hair had more silver in it than she remembered, threads of it catching the afternoon light. His scar, the one running from his eye to his cheekbone, seemed less severe in sunlight, less like a weapon and more like a map. "Thank you," she said. "For all of this." He shook his head. "You saved my sons. I gave you money." "Not the same thing." "You gave me my life back," she said. "You gave me a reason to believe someone might care." "That is not the same as money." He looked at her fully then, and the walls that had surrounded him for 15 years seemed to finally come down, not all of them, never all of them, but enough. Enough to let her see the person underneath the empire. "I do care," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "More than I have cared about anything since my father died. More than I thought I could. More than I want to admit." He reached for her hand, and she took it. His palm was warm, calloused, marked with thin white scars of his own. "I spent 15 years building an empire on revenge. You taught me what it feels like to build something else." "What is that?" she asked. "A family." He pulled her closer, his hand moving to her face, his thumb tracing her cheekbone with a gentleness that seemed impossible from someone so dangerous. "I know I am not easy. I know what I am. What I do. I know the things I have done would horrify you if you knew the details. But if you will have me." She kissed him, cutting off the words. The cherry blossoms swirled around them. In the distance, she heard Marco laugh, heard Enzo call out a warning about a flying burger. The children played, oblivious and safe. When they pulled apart, she whispered against his mouth, "I already chose you. That night on the highway when I got in your car. I just did not know it yet." He rested his forehead against hers, breathing in the scent of her, something like soap and spring and hope. The thing he had been afraid to name, afraid to need, afraid to lose, was finally standing in front of him, choosing him back. Not because he was powerful. Not because he was dangerous. But because underneath all of it, he was a man who had grieved, and she was a woman who understood grief better than anyone alive. Tyler Brennan and Victoria Ashford both received 40-year federal sentences. No parole. No appeals that succeeded. They lost everything: money, reputation, freedom. Within 1 hour of their sentencing, the story went viral. Within 48 hours, 2.3 million people had viewed the footage of their arrest. By the end of the week, every news outlet in the country had run some version of the story: landlord and socialite arrested for extortion ring. Tyler sat in a federal prison in upstate New York, his expensive suits replaced with orange jumpsuit, his predatory leverage turned to dust. He would die in a cell, exactly like the one he had rented out for $800 a month to women he terrorized. Victoria Ashford, the wealthy socialite with her appetite for cruelty, lost her society circle, her inheritance tied up in lawsuits, her name synonymous with exploitation and abuse. She would spend 40 years remembering the moment her world collapsed. But Allara Harper rebuilt her life piece by piece, learned that strength is not never falling but getting back up every time, even when the cost of falling was written on her body in scars. She started a non-profit with her first year's savings, House of Hope, a shelter for women leaving abusive situations. Matteo funded it silently, no questions asked, no publicity. The shelter now serves 43 women a year. Some of them make it. Some of them do not. But they all know that someone cared enough to try. Matteo Conti, a man who thought he had forgotten how to feel anything but rage, discovered that protection and love are often the same thing, that the capacity to guard something or someone with your life is just another way of saying you belong to them completely. This story teaches us something essential: sometimes the most broken people save each other. Sometimes justice is not about vengeance, it is about making sure the people who hurt you never hurt anyone again. And sometimes, one hand reached out at exactly the right moment can change an entire life completely. If this story moved you, drop a like right now. Share it with someone who needs to hear that rescue can come from unexpected places, that healing is possible, that the people who hurt us do not get to write our ending. Subscribe, because tomorrow we have another story about a woman who refused to stay down and the powerful man who gave her the strength to stand. Comment below. Have you ever had someone reach out a hand when you needed it most? Your story matters. Tell it. We will see you tomorrow.